At 56 years old, Phil Mickelson has won everything golf has to offer. 6 major championships, a Hall of Fame career, over $1 billion in career earnings. But right now, none of that matters, because 2 of his lifelong family businesses are being forced into total liquidation. The man who built an empire on the golf course and off it is now watching parts of that empire crumble. And the question every golf fan is asking is simple. How does this happen to someone with his money, his status, his success? What businesses are we talking about? And more importantly, what went so wrong that liquidation became the only option? This isn't just about business failure. It's about a chain of events that started years ago, involving hundreds of millions of dollars, a golf league that's collapsing, gambling losses that would ruin most people, and a family health crisis that has kept him off the course for most of 2026. Each piece connects to the next, and when you see the full picture, you'll understand why this story is bigger than just 2 businesses shutting down. In my view, this isn't just about business failure. It's about what happens when a career built on risk finally runs out of luck. Do you think Phil brought this on himself, or is he just a victim of circumstances? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to stay updated on this story as it develops, hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more coming. The numbers alone don't tell you what happened here. This story isn't really about money at all. To understand what actually got liquidated, you first need to know what businesses we're talking about. Because these weren't side projects or small investments Phil made on a whim. These were businesses tied to his name, his family, and his future. The first one is something you might have seen driving through Orange County, California. Phil Mickelson is part of an ownership group that purchased rights for multiple Five Guys franchises in that area. For those who don't know, Five Guys is one of the biggest fast food burger chains in America. Phil didn't just own one location, he owned several. These weren't tiny burger stands. They were full-scale restaurant operations employing dozens of people, bringing in steady revenue and representing a significant chunk of his off-course business portfolio. Here's the thing about Five Guys in 2026. The chain has been quietly closing locations across multiple states. Not because the food is bad, but because operating costs have gone through the roof. Rent, labor, beef prices, everything is more expensive. When you own multiple franchises, those costs multiply fast. The math stops working. And when the math stops working, the banks start asking questions. And let me tell you, running multiple Five Guys locations in Orange County is not like running one restaurant in a small town. You're dealing with some of the highest commercial lease rates in the entire country. You're competing with every other fast casual chain within a 2-mile radius. You need managers, assistant managers, line cooks, cashiers, cleaning crews. Each location can carry a payroll of $30,000 to $50,000 a month before you've sold a single burger. Multiply that across several locations, and you're looking at $250,000 a month just to keep the lights on and the grills hot. That's before food costs, before utilities, before the franchise fees you owe Five Guys corporate every single quarter. When revenue dips even 10%, you're underwater. And in 2026, with consumer spending tightening across the board, that dip wasn't 10%. It was worse. The second business is smaller but more personal. In 2020, Phil Mickelson co-founded a company called For Wellness with his business partner Dave Phillips. The company's flagship product was something called The Good Stuff, a coffee-based nutritional supplement designed to give you energy and focus. It was Phil's attempt to build something that combined his love for coffee with his status as a professional athlete. The business was based in Scottsdale, Arizona, and at its peak employed about 5 people. It wasn't a massive operation, but it was his name, his brand, his family's involvement. The wellness supplement space is brutal. You're fighting for shelf space against companies with massive marketing budgets, companies that can spend $10 million on a single ad campaign. Phil had name recognition, sure. But name recognition in golf doesn't automatically translate to someone buying your coffee supplement at a grocery store in Ohio. The customer base for golf and the customer base for performance supplements overlap, but they're not the same circle. And when the money to market the product dried up, the sales dried up with it. 5 employees doesn't sound like a lot until those 5 people have families and mortgages, and you can't make payroll on Friday. Neither of these businesses were failing because they were bad ideas. Five Guys is still a successful chain. Performance coffee is still a growing market. So what happened? The answer is that both businesses became collateral damage in something much larger. A storm that had been building for years finally hit shore. But here's what makes this truly shocking. These businesses didn't fail because they were bad ideas. Phil Mickelson had two problems that made those businesses unsustainable. The first was his contract with LIV Golf, and the second was something he'd been carrying for decades. Let's start with LIV. In 2022, Phil Mickelson made a decision that changed everything. He signed a contract worth approximately $200 million to join the Saudi-backed LIV Golf League. At the time, it looked like the smartest move of his career. He was already in his 50s, his best years on the course were behind him, and he was securing a massive payday that would set up his family for generations. But that deal came with a cost. It destroyed his relationship with the PGA Tour. He burned bridges he could never rebuild. Now fast forward to 2026. The Saudi Public Investment Fund, which had poured over $5 billion into LIV since its launch, made a decision that shocked the golf world. They withdrew their funding. LIV Golf, which had been spending money faster than anyone could track, suddenly had no cash flow. The league is now desperately trying to raise $300 million in fresh capital by September 1st, 2026. If they can't find it, the entire league collapses. And it's not just Phil sitting in this mess. Every single player who left the PGA Tour for LIV is staring at the same empty bank account. Guys who walked away from FedEx Cup points, from major championship exemptions, from the kind of career stability that the PGA Tour had provided for decades. They walked away because the LIV money looked guaranteed. It looked like you could play 14 events a year, collect a 9-figure check, and never worry about making a cut again. That promise is now evaporating. The league can't pay its players, the league can't pay its vendors, the league can't even confirm whether next season exists. And the players who jumped ship, they can't exactly call the PGA Tour and ask for their old spots back. Those spots are filled. The schedule moved on. The fans moved on. And that's the part nobody talks about enough. The PGA Tour didn't just move on emotionally. They restructured. They locked in new broadcast deals. They built the FedEx Cup playoffs into something with real stakes and real money at the end. The signature events got bigger purses. The fields got deeper. The tour that Phil walked away from in 2022 is not the same tour that exists in 2026. It's richer, more structured, and it doesn't need him. That's the hardest pill to swallow. You leave, thinking they'll beg you to come back. They didn't. They got better without you. Here's where it gets personal for Phil. Those $200 million contracts weren't guaranteed if the league failed. The PIF wasn't obligated to pay out the remaining years. Phil, who had walked away from the PGA Tour, who had no path back, now found himself with no reliable income from the league he'd bet his career on. He had nowhere to play. His relationship with the PGA Tour was, in his own words, detonated and destroyed. Rejoining would require not just a suspension, but a massive fine that would likely run into the tens of millions. Think about what that means. A man who earned over $1 billion in his career suddenly had his primary income stream cut off. Those businesses, the Five Guys franchises and For Wellness, they required money to operate. Money that wasn't coming in anymore. But losing a $200 million contract is only half the story. The other half involves money that was lost long before LIV even existed. Phil Mickelson's gambling history is not a secret. It's been documented for years. The numbers are staggering. Over the course of 3 decades, Phil's gambling losses approached $100 million. That's not a rumor. That's been reported by multiple outlets. Between 2010 and 2014 alone, he lost over $40 million. The total amount he wagered over his lifetime exceeded $1 billion. Let that sink in for a moment. Over $1 billion in bets placed over 30 years. There was one day in June, just a regular day, where Phil lost $143,000 on baseball bets. One day, $143,000 gone. For most people, that's a house. For Phil, that was just another Tuesday. And here's the thing about gambling and golf specifically. Golf is a sport built on individual accountability. There's no team to hide behind. No coach calling plays from the sideline. You stand over a 6-foot putt on the 18th green at a major, and it's you, the ball, and the hole. Nobody else. That same mindset, that belief that you can control the outcome through sheer will and skill, it bleeds into everything else. Phil approached gambling the way he approached a difficult shot. He thought he could read the situation, trust his instincts, and come out ahead. And sometimes he did. But the house doesn't care about your instincts. The house doesn't care that you won the Masters in 2004 or that you hit a miracle shot from the pine straw at the 2021 PGA Championship. The math is the math. And over 30 years, the math caught up. There's nothing illegal about what he did. Gambling is legal in many places, but the scale of it is almost impossible to comprehend. Gambling at that level doesn't just affect your bank account, it affects your decision-making, it affects your relationships, it affects your ability to run businesses, because when you're bleeding millions every year, you start making desperate choices. This gambling wasn't something that happened in the background, it was front and center in Phil's life. In 2016, he was forced to repay $1 million in profits from an insider trading case. The government said he used confidential information to make stock trades. He wasn't charged with a crime, but he had to give the money back. That's a stain on anyone's reputation. The gambling didn't stop. The insider trading case didn't stop him. The public scrutiny didn't stop him. Combine that with the LIV money drying up, and you start to see the picture. A man who had been bleeding money for decades suddenly had his income source cut off. The businesses he owned, the franchises, and the coffee company, they were supposed to be his safety net. Instead, they became the first things to go. If it had stopped there, maybe he could have survived. But the gambling wasn't the only thing destroying him. Something else happened that changed how people saw Phil Mickelson. Something that cost him his place at one of the most exclusive golf clubs in America. The Farms Golf Club is not just any golf course. It's a private club in Rancho Santa Fe, California, one of the most prestigious in the state. Phil Mickelson was a member there. He'd played there for years. It was his home course, a place where he could relax and play without the pressure of tournaments. And you have to understand what a private golf club membership actually means in that world. It's not just a place to play 18 holes. It's a social institution. It's where deals get made over the back nine. It's where your kids learn to play. It's where your name is on a locker, where the pro shop knows your bag setup, where the caddies know exactly how you like your yardage is called. Losing that membership isn't like losing a gym membership. It's being erased from a community you spent years building a place in. The Farms had members who'd been there for 30, 40 years, generations of families, and they voted to remove Phil. Not quietly, not with a polite letter, with what they called decisive action. But in 2026, the Farms made a decision that shocked everyone who knew Phil. They kicked him out. Actually, it wasn't just kicking him out. The club took decisive action against him. That was the phrase they used in their official statement. Decisive action. What happened? According to multiple reports, Phil was involved in an incident with a female employee at the club. There were allegations of inappropriate contact. The club investigated, and they decided to revoke his membership. He wasn't just asked to leave, he was told he couldn't come back. Imagine that for a moment. Phil Mickelson, one of the greatest golfers in history, a man who had won 6 major championships, was told he wasn't welcome at his own golf club. That's not just embarrassing, that's humiliating. It tells you something about how people in the golf world had started to view him. It wasn't just the gambling anymore. It wasn't just the LIV decision. It was his behavior, his reputation, the way he treated people. This wasn't the only club that cut ties with him. There was also the Madison Club in La Quinta, California. Phil owned a condo there. It was a beautiful property in one of the most exclusive communities in the country. After everything that happened, after the gambling, the LIV mess, the reputation damage, his wife Amy's wealth management firm stepped in. They demanded something that must have been incredibly painful for Phil. They said, "We need Phil's place sold. Gone. Right now. Gone. Not listed for sale. Not rented out. Gone. Sold immediately." When your wife's financial advisors are telling you to liquidate your properties, you know things are bad. When people who manage your money are saying you need to get rid of assets as fast as possible, it means the cash flow has stopped. The money is gone. The creditors are coming. But even with all of this, the LIV money gone, the gambling losses, the reputation destroyed, there was one more thing that happened. Something personal that may have been the final straw. In 2026, Phil Mickelson has played just one event, just one tournament all year. He missed the Masters. He missed the PGA Championship. He's been absent from LIV events. The reason is not golf-related. It's much more serious than that. Phil announced that he was stepping away from competition because of a private family health matter. Sources close to the situation have confirmed that it involves one of his children. His family has been dealing with a health crisis that has required his full attention. His wife Amy, who is a breast cancer survivor, has had to deal with this as well. Phil, for all his flaws, has been there for his family. Here's the thing about stepping away from golf. When you're not playing, you're not earning. When you're not earning, the bills don't stop. The Five Guys franchises still have rent. The employees still need to be paid. For Wellness still has operating costs. when there's no income coming in from tournaments, when the LIV money has stopped, when your reputation is so damaged that sponsors won't touch you, what do? You liquidate. The word liquidation sounds cold and technical, but it's devastating. Total liquidation means everything is being sold. The assets, the equipment, the inventory, everything. The businesses don't continue. They don't get sold to someone who will keep them running. They get shut down. The doors close. The employees lose their jobs. The investors lose their money. The whole thing just disappears. And practically speaking, here's what that looks like on the ground. A court-appointed liquidator walks into each Five Guys location. They catalog every grill, every fryer, every walk-in cooler, every register. They post notices on the doors. The staff gets a date, usually 2 weeks, maybe 3. After that, the locks change. The lease goes back to the landlord. The signage comes down. For wellness, it's the same process. The remaining inventory of the good stuff gets sold off at a fraction of its retail price. The office in Scottsdale gets emptied. The 5 people who worked there, the ones who believed in what Phil was building, they get a severance check if there's money left for one. Usually there isn't. For someone like Phil Mickelson, who built these businesses with his own name and reputation, watching them get liquidated is not just a financial loss. It's personal. These weren't anonymous corporations. These were Phil's businesses, his family's businesses. They carried his name, his brand, his legacy. So now you know why. But here's the part people keep asking. How does a man worth over $300 million actually lose businesses? How does the liquidation even work? The mechanics of it are brutal. Total liquidation means forced asset sales. Court-ordered, creditor-driven, not voluntary. Phil's businesses had debts they couldn't pay. The creditors went to court. The court said, sell everything and pay back what you owe. That's the cold reality. The businesses are gone. The money is gone. The only thing left is the question everyone is asking. What happens to Phil Mickelson now? The answer is complicated. LIV Golf may not exist in 2027. If they can't find $300 million by September, the league is done. Phil has no path back to the PGA Tour. His relationship with them is destroyed. He's a man without a country, a player with nowhere to play. He still has money. Reports put his net worth somewhere between $300 and $383 million. That's not pocket change. But at 56, with no competitive home, with his reputation in tatters, with businesses that he spent years building now gone, what does he do? Does he try to rebuild? Does he retire? Does he disappear from the public eye? There's a version of this where Phil plays the Champions Tour. He's age eligible. He could show up at senior events, play in front of smaller crowds, earn modest purses, and let time do what time does. The fans who booed him in 2022 might not boo him in 2028. Memories in golf are long, but they're not infinite. Jack Nicklaus played the senior circuit. Tom Watson played into his 60s. There's a path there, but it requires Phil to swallow a pride that has defined his entire career. It requires him to show up at events that are a fraction of the scale he's used to, in front of galleries that are a tenth of what followed him at Augusta or Pebble Beach. Whether he can do that, whether his ego allows it, that's the question. And the golf world is watching this closely. Not out of cruelty, out of genuine curiosity. Because Phil Mickelson's story is the story of what happens when the game you love stops loving you back. The USGA hasn't commented. The R&A hasn't commented. The major championships haven't extended invitations. The silence from those institutions says more than any press release ever could. They're not banning him. They're just not calling. And in golf, not being called is the same as not existing. Phil himself has said that his priority is becoming the husband, father, and man his family deserves. That's a quote from him. It's a recognition that he's made mistakes, that his choices, the gambling, the LIV decision, the way he's treated people, have cost him more than money. They've cost him his legacy. Think about this. Phil Mickelson was once the second most marketable player in golf. Only Tiger Woods was bigger. He had endorsement deals with Rolex, Callaway, KPMG, and dozens of others. Companies lined up to have him represent their brands. He was the people's champion, the guy who took on Tiger and sometimes won. Now, he's a cautionary tale, a reminder that money, fame, and success don't protect you from bad decisions. That gambling doesn't just cost you money, it costs you relationships, reputation, and eventually, your businesses. That loyalty to a golf league that didn't care about you can leave you with nothing. Now you know who, which, why, And how? The only question left is the one nobody's answered yet. What happens to Phil Mickelson now? Phil Mickelson built an empire on the golf course and off it, but empires don't always last. At 56, with two family businesses forced into total liquidation, a $200 million contract in jeopardy, and nowhere left to play, the greatest gambler in golf history may have finally placed one bet too many. The question isn't whether he can come back from this. The question is, what's left to come back to?